Welcome to History What If, where we question the events that already happened. What really could have happened? Could we have changed the outcome? Before we begin, everything you're about to hear is based on historical research, facts, and records. The what if scenarios are my own opinion and interpretation of events, designed to make you think, question, and explore history differently. This is not the official historical record. This is history, through a different lens. Today's question: what if Xerox, yes, the copier company, had actually kept the invention that they accidentally handed to both Apple and Microsoft? An invention that built the entire modern computer. Let's go. Picture this, the 1970s. There's a research lab full of geniuses who invent the future. The mouse, the Windows and icons screen you're looking at right now, even early email and networking. All of it, decades ahead of everyone. And the company that owns this lab looks at it and goes, let's keep making copiers. That company was Xerox, and that decision is one of the most expensive mistakes in history. To understand how big this blunder is, everything you use on a computer or phone today, the little icons, the windows, clicking with a mouse, that all came from this one Xerox lab called PARC. Before this, computers were just blinking text on a black screen, and you had to type cryptic commands like a wizard. PARC made computers something a normal human could actually use, and Xerox sat on it. And here's the wild part. Xerox wasn't even secretive about it. They showed this miracle machine off to thousands of people. They basically left the future sitting on the porch with a "free, please take" sign. So two young, hungry guys took them up on it. You may have heard of them, the Apple guy and the Microsoft guy. Because what happens next is the stuff of legend. One genius takes the idea and builds a masterpiece. The other genius takes the masterpiece and builds an empire. They go to war. There's a lawsuit. And there's a one-liner so savage it's still quoted 40 years later. So today, we untangle the greatest who stole what from whom in business history. So grab your vintage beige computer and your sense of betrayal. We're pulling the thread on the heist that built Silicon Valley. Let's set the stage. In the 1960s and 70s, Xerox was an absolute titan. They invented the modern copier, had a near monopoly, and were pulling in over $500 million a year. They were so rich, they decided to throw money at a wild idea. Build a research lab, hire the smartest people on Earth, and let them invent whatever they wanted. That lab was Xerox PARC. And PARC delivered. These researchers were cooking. They invented the graphical user interface, the windows and icons. They refined the computer mouse. They created Ethernet, the thing that networks computers together. They built early laser printing. This one lab basically invented modern computing in a single decade. It was the most productive brain trust in tech history. They put it all into one machine, the Xerox Alto, a computer so far ahead of its time, it had a mouse, a clean graphical screen, email, and word processing. In the early 1970s, when everyone else was staring at blinking green text. It was the future, fully built, sitting right there. There was just one teeny problem. Xerox management did not care. At all. They looked at the machine that would reshape human civilization and said, "Does it help us sell more copiers? No? Then who cares?" The executives literally could not see what they were holding. It's like inventing fire and being annoyed it's not a better stick. This is the blunder the whole story hinges on. Enter the Apple guy. In 1979, Steve Jobs and his team got a tour of Xerox PARC, and when Jobs saw that graphical screen and that mouse, his brain basically caught fire. He later said it was one of the most important moments of his life. He saw what Xerox couldn't, that this was the future of computers, and he ran with it. Now, was this stealing? Sort of, but not really. Apple actually gave Xerox the chance to buy Apple stock before its IPO in exchange for the tour. So Xerox got something. And more importantly, Apple didn't just copy it, they massively improved it, made it cheaper, prettier, and actually affordable for regular people. Xerox had the idea. Apple made it real. That's the whole difference. So Apple builds the Macintosh, launches it in 1984, and it's a revolution. A computer normal people can actually use, with a mouse and a friendly screen. Apple took Xerox's ignored idea and turned it into a cultural icon. But while Apple was celebrating, there was another hungry genius watching very, very closely, and he was supposed to be on Apple's team. Here's the deliciously awkward part. Microsoft wasn't Apple's enemy at this point. They were Apple's partner. Microsoft was making software for the Macintosh. They were literally on the inside, building programs for the Mac, which meant they got an up-close look at exactly how this magical graphical computer worked. You can probably see where this is going. So Microsoft, having seen how the Mac worked from the inside, goes off and builds its own graphical operating system, Windows. And when Windows showed up, it looked strikingly similar to the Macintosh. Same idea, Windows, icons, a mouse. Apple's reaction can best be described as absolutely losing it. The Apple guy was furious. From his point of view, he'd let Microsoft into his house to help with the plumbing, and they'd walked out with the blueprints. He felt completely betrayed. And this is where the most legendary exchange in tech history supposedly happened, and it is chef's kiss. When confronted and accused of stealing the idea, the Microsoft guy reportedly delivered this absolute masterpiece of a comeback. I think it's more like we both had this rich neighbor named Xerox, and I broke into his house to steal the TV, but found out you'd already stolen it. Translation: you can't accuse me of robbing the place you already robbed. Devastating, accurate, iconic. And that line cuts right to the truth of the whole mess. Nobody here is innocent. Xerox invented it and threw it away. Apple took it and improved it. Microsoft took Apple's version and ran with it. It's not a hero and villain story. It's three companies in a chain of borrowing, each one mad at the next. The tech industry was basically founded on creative theft. So Apple did what any furious company does. They sued. In 1988, Apple took Microsoft to court over Windows looking too much like the Mac. It was going to be the lawsuit of the century, the battle to decide who really owned the look of modern computing. There was just one problem with Apple's timing. A big one. While Apple was busy fighting the lawsuit, Windows was busy winning. The case dragged on for years, and in the meantime, Microsoft put Windows on cheap computers everywhere, and it took over the entire world. By the time the lawsuit fizzled out, the question of who copied who didn't even matter anymore, because Microsoft had already won the actual war. Apple won the moral argument and lost the market. By the mid-90s, the story had flipped completely. Microsoft was the most powerful company in tech, Windows ran the world, and Apple, the company that started it all, was nearly bankrupt, months from going under. The genius who built the masterpiece was about to watch his company die. So how does this insane story end? Let's pull the thread all the way. Now here's the plot twist nobody could write. In 1997, with Apple on death's door, who swoops in to save them? Microsoft. The rival that supposedly stole everything invests $150 million into Apple to keep it alive. The villain bails out the hero. Why? Partly because Microsoft needed Apple to survive so they wouldn't be an illegal monopoly. Karma with a business plan. And that lifeline? It worked. That cash helped Apple get back on its feet, which led to the iMac, then the iPod, then the iPhone, and Apple eventually became the most valuable company on the planet. So the company Microsoft rescued out of pity went on to dwarf them. The TV-stealing neighbor's house became a palace. The karma in this story is absolutely relentless. But our actual question today is about the company that started, and threw away, this whole saga, Xerox. So let's run the real what if. What if Xerox executives had actually listened to their geniuses and kept the invention instead of letting two random startups walk off with the future? Let's go visit that timeline. So let's enter the timeline where Xerox actually understood what it had. In this world, those executives walk into PARC, see the Alto, and instead of yawning, their jaws hit the floor. They realize this isn't a side project, this is the future. They drop everything and bet the entire copier fortune on the personal computer. Xerox doesn't sell the future, Xerox sells the future. In this timeline, by the early 1980s, the hot computer everyone wants isn't an Apple or an IBM, it's a Xerox. Your home computer is a Xerox. Your office runs on Xerox machines. The mouse in your hand has a Xerox logo. The copier company becomes the most important technology company on Earth, years before Apple or Microsoft even get going. And here's the funny ripple. The Apple guy never gets his big moment. He visits PARC, but instead of a sleepy lab he can borrow from, he finds a company that's locked everything down and is already selling it. No free TV to grab. Apple might have stayed a small computer company, or pivoted to something else entirely. No Macintosh as we know it. The whole legend never happens. But here's the twist, and it's a big one. Just because Xerox had the better idea doesn't mean they'd have done it well. Remember, Apple's superpower wasn't inventing the GUI, it was making it beautiful, cheap, and human. Xerox was a slow corporate copier company. They might have kept the technology locked up, overpriced, and clunky, and the personal computer revolution could have been delayed by years. Having the idea isn't the same as knowing what to do with it. So welcome to the Xerox timeline. Maybe it's a world where computers advance faster because the richest company leads the charge. Or maybe it's a world where they advance slower because a sleepy giant sat on the technology and milked it. Honestly, it could go either way. That's what makes this what if so juicy. Let's keep exploring. Funniest ripple effect. The most legendary rivalry in business history just never happens. No Apple versus Microsoft, no Mac guy versus PC guy commercials, no fanboys arguing for 40 years, no iPhone versus Android wars descended from it. An entire culture of tech tribalism evaporates, all because some executives in the 70s actually paid attention in a meeting. And the legendary rich neighbor named Xerox line? Never said, because in this timeline, nobody robbed Xerox. Xerox kept its own TV, mounted it on the wall, and charged everyone a subscription to watch it. The single best insult in tech history is erased from existence, a real loss for comedy, honestly. The money would be unimaginable. In our timeline, Apple and Microsoft became two of the most valuable companies that have ever existed, worth trillions, built largely on that one PARC idea. In the Xerox timeline, all of that value funnels into Xerox. The copier company becomes one of the richest entities in human history. Imagine a world where Xerox is the biggest name in tech, instead of a word that means photocopy. There's a sweet irony here too. In the real timeline, Xerox's blunder accidentally created more competition and innovation. Because the idea escaped into the wild, two hungry companies fought over it, and that war pushed computers to get better, cheaper, and faster for all of us. Xerox losing the idea might have been the best thing that ever happened to consumers. Sometimes a fumble helps everyone but the fumbler. There's a real lesson buried in this one, and it's huge. The idea is almost never the hard part. Xerox had the world-changing idea, and it was worthless to them because they didn't know what to do with it. Apple and Microsoft had the same idea and built empires. Execution beats invention. A great idea in the wrong hands is just an expensive science project. Host at chalkboard, the real point. Plus host at a chalkboard reading execution greater than invention, a glowing idea bulb next to a pile of money showing the gap. Top text, the real lesson. Bottom banner, the idea isn't the hard part. And this isn't just an old story, it happens constantly. Companies sit on game-changing ideas all the time because they can't see past their current cash cow. Kodak invented the digital camera and buried it to protect film. Blockbuster laughed Netflix out of the room. Xerox is just the most spectacular example of a giant that invented its own replacement and handed it to strangers. Which reveals the real villain of the story, and it's not Apple or Microsoft, it's the failure of imagination. Xerox had the smartest people, the best technology, and a mountain of money. What they lacked was the vision to see what they were holding. Being rich and smart isn't enough. You have to actually recognize the future when it's sitting on your desk. So here's the domino effect of Xerox keeping the idea. Xerox listens, leads to dominates. Personal computing leads to no Macintosh as we know it, leads to no Windows, leads to no Apple-Microsoft rivalry, leads to no legendary insult, leads to, and possibly a slower, more expensive, more boring tech world ruled by one copier company. One meeting, one decision, and the entire shape of Silicon Valley changes. Compare that to our actual timeline, where the dominoes fell perfectly chaotically. Xerox fumbled, Apple grabbed and improved, Microsoft grabbed Apple's version, they went to war, the war made computers cheap and everywhere, and we all ended up with powerful devices in our pockets. The messiest possible outcome turned out to be the best one for us. Chaos, it turns out, was the feature. Could it have gone the other way? Sure, maybe a focused Xerox would have built the future faster and we'd have iPhones in the 1990s. But history suggests that monopolies get lazy and competition is what actually drives things forward. Xerox losing its grip forced the whole industry to sprint. The blunder lit a fire under everyone. Now picture our hero, the Xerox Alto, the greatest computer of its era, showing up to claim its rightful place in history. And the universe goes, "Buddy, your own company didn't even want you. You changed the entire world by being given away. You're the most influential computer nobody's ever heard of. The saddest, most important machine in tech." And here's the kicker. Even in the Xerox timeline, someone eventually figures out the GUI. Ideas this good don't stay locked up forever. Maybe a different startup, maybe a foreign company, maybe a couple of kids in a garage somewhere else. The future was coming no matter what. Xerox could only decide whether to lead it or fumble it, not whether it happened. So, whether Xerox kept it or fumbled it, the graphical computer was going to take over the world eventually. The only thing that changed was who got rich, who became legends, and whether we got one of the greatest insults in business history. The technology was inevitable. The drama, the rivalry, the personalities, that's the part history actually remembers. And that's the brain melter. The entire modern world, every phone, every laptop, every icon you tap, traces back to one lab full of geniuses whose own bosses didn't care. The most important invention of the era was nearly buried by the people who owned it. History doesn't always turn on wars and kings. Sometimes it turns on a board executive saying, "Nah," in a meeting in 1979. Meanwhile, in our actual reality, you're using Xerox's idea right now, improved by Apple, spread by Microsoft, to watch a cartoon man explain how none of these companies fully invented the thing they're famous for. The icons on your screen are the spoils of the greatest three-way borrowing in history. You're living in the winning timeline. Congrats. And here's the genuinely useful takeaway, no jokes. Don't ever think the idea is enough. Xerox is proof that the world's best idea is worthless without the courage to act on it. Whatever you're sitting on, a business, a project, a dream, the lesson of this whole story is that execution, not invention, is what changes your life. Xerox had everything and did nothing. Don't be Xerox. So let's bring it home. The graphical computer was invented by Xerox, who didn't care. It was perfected by Apple, who got robbed right back by their own partner Microsoft, who conquered the world with it. Then bailed Apple out years later, only to watch Apple become the biggest company alive. The pettiest, most karmic chain of events in business history. And it all started with one ignored lab. It took a clueless copier company, two ruthless geniuses, a betrayal, a lawsuit, a legendary insult, and a surprise rescue to build the modern computer. And the wildest part is that the company that invented it all is now mostly remembered as a word that means make a photocopy. History is rarely fair, but it's always entertaining. And the real takeaway? The biggest winners in history usually aren't the inventors. They're the ones bold enough to take an idea and actually run with it. Xerox had the future in its hands and set it down. Two scrappy upstarts picked it up and changed the world. The lesson echoes way beyond computers. Don't sit on your gift. Someone hungrier is always watching. So next time you click an icon, drag a window, or move your mouse, give a little nod to a lab called Xerox PARC, the geniuses nobody listened to, and the greatest fumble in business history. The whole digital world you live in was built on an idea its own owners threw away. Wild, isn't it? And that's what if Xerox kept the idea that made Apple and Microsoft. The greatest fumble, heist, and comeback in tech history, all in one. If this blew your mind, smash subscribe, because next week we pull another thread and break history all over again. I'll see you in the next one. What if?